So we can start by paying homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasāmi. So this evening I was thinking to talk about old classic topic. So one of these topics that never really gets old. In talking about meditation practice, one of the very useful frameworks to consider is the five hindrances, nivarana, as they're called in Pali. Because this is a really good framework for understanding how to improve our concentration. So by purifying the mind of the five hindrances, clearing away the five hindrances, then concentration becomes much easier. Practicing meditation becomes a much simpler matter. A matter of simply putting the mind on the meditation object and not moving it from there. So understanding what the five hindrances are and how to deal with them then is a centrally important feature of our meditation practice. So the five hindrances, I'll list them briefly and then I'll go through them in more detail. Briefly, the five hindrances are kama chanda, which means interest in sensuality, vyapada, which is aversion or negativity, tina midda, which is dullness, drowsiness, uddhacca kukucca, which is agitation and remorse. And then the fifth one is vicikicca, which means skepticism. So these five hindrances then, first off we can see that the first four are set as two pairs. So kamachanda, interest in sensuality, and vyapada, aversion. These are indicating the two basic movements of the mind. So either trying to pull in things that we like or trying to push away things that we dislike. So this basic pulling and pushing or liking and disliking movements of mind. The third and fourth, so the third one, tina midda, which is dullness or drowsiness, and the fourth one, which is agitation, restlessness. These also indicate the two modes of the mind. So dullness is when the mind is too low energy, and agitation is when the mind is too high energy. So it's about discerning the right level of energy in the mind. And then the fifth one stands alone. So the subject of skepticism, it stands alone, though it has some relationship to mental agitation or mental restlessness, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail when I come to that one. So the first one, kama chanda. So this is made up of two words. The first word is kama, which means sensuality or sensory stimulation. And in the suttas, it's usually specifically talking about the five physical senses. So sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, the five physical senses. And the second word in this word compound is chanda, which has the meaning of interest in something or enthusiasm for something, or more generally, it can be translated as desire. And so kamachanda then is being interested in sensory stimulation, having a desire for any kind of sensory stimulation, any kind of physical experience. So kamachanda as interest in sensuality or interest in physical sensory experience then has quite a broad range of meaning. So it's basically interest in any kind of sensory experience. So kamacchanda can be specific. So for example, while sitting in meditation, you might have a desire arise for a particular kind of food, or a desire for a certain kind of music, or a desire for watching a movie, or a desire for talking to your friend, or whatever, or any other imaginable sensory experience. It can also just be a more generalized seeking for sensory stimulation. So maybe a non-specified or non-specific. We might not be specifically thinking, I want to eat this particular food, or I want to listen to that kind of music, or I want to do that activity. It might not be something so specific. It might just be a general craving for some kind of sensory stimulation. So kamacchanda then is often very closely related to boredom. So boredom often is just this urge for something stimulating, something engaging, something that we can experience, something we can do, something we can feel. So this then fits under kamacchanda. It's this urge to feel things, this urge to have some kind of sensory stimulation. And usually the implication is a pleasant or desirable sensory stimulation. So wanting to eat good food that we like, wanting to watch entertaining movies that we enjoy, wanting to talk with people who we find agreeable, people who are friendly or interesting, wanting to see or hear or smell or taste or touch things that we like, that are pleasant. But kamacchanda also can, again, it can mean wanting sensory stimulation in a broader sense. So sometimes actually we would rather have an unpleasant experience than nothing at all. Sometimes we would rather have something unpleasant because that at least it's interesting, it's novel, it's new, it's different. Anything to break the boredom. Even doing something not so enjoyable might seem more appealing than doing nothing at all. So kamacchanda, again, usually it has the sense of interest in some kind of pleasant sensory stimulation, but understanding that it does have a broader meaning. It can also include this broader urge for sensory stimulation of any sort. And there's a number of ways of working with this. One of the more direct ways is to pay attention to the feeling of desire itself. So paying attention to the uncomfortable or unpleasant or irritating feeling of that desire. So while you're craving something or wanting something or imagining getting some particular experience, we're usually focusing on the presumed pleasantness of getting whatever we want, or the presumed pleasantness of being distracted or entertained or whatever it is, or stimulated in whatever way. And so then what we're missing is what the actual experience of desire feels like. So what does kamacchanda itself actually feel like? So paying attention to the feeling of kamacchanda, so this feeling of having an interest in or desire for a sensory experience. How does that actually feel? And you'll notice that mental activity of sensory desire is inherently uncomfortable. It's an inherently painful experience. So again, we're normally so focused on the assumption that we're going to get some pleasant experience in the future that we actually ignore the fact that we're inflicting pain on ourselves right here in the present moment. That by engaging in this activity of desiring sensory stimulation, we're actually making ourselves unhappy right here and right now. So this can be one very direct way of dealing with kamacchanda, is pay attention to the inherent painfulness of the desire itself, of that activity of seeking sensory stimulation, of imagining or wanting sensory stimulation. Notice how inherently unpleasant that is. And then the mind will naturally tend to pull back from that activity. It will naturally tend to drop that activity. And we kind of wake up to the fact that we're torturing ourselves, then usually we'll stop. we'll start refraining from that mental activity. Another thing which can be useful is to think about whatever it is that we actually want to get. So whatever sensory experience we're craving for. Imagining if we actually get that, and think, is it actually going to be 100% completely, perfectly satisfying? So even assuming that we get whatever we want, is it really going to make us overwhelmingly happy? Is it really going to make us blissful and joyful? Is it really going to be a stunning peak experience? And the answer is almost always going to be no. We actually know from past experience that pleasant sensory experiences, no matter how pleasant, are almost never 100% over the top amazing. Sometimes they're pretty good, but very rarely, if ever, are they like completely over the top amazing. And on the rare occasions when we do have over the top amazing experiences, then like everything else, they're temporary. They're impermanent. They don't last. They're fleeting. They have a certain duration and then it runs out. So that duration might be a few seconds or it might be a few hours. It doesn't really matter. The point is that it's a temporary experience. And when it fades, then we're back to the same sense of hollow yearning. That hollow yearning isn't removed by having some experience of sensory stimulation. It's simply delayed for a period of time. And actually, if you watch the mind, you'll realize that even while you're having a pleasant sensory experience, that yearning is still present in the background. It changes shape and form, and it tends to be overshadowed by the current sensory stimulation. But that sense of incompleteness, of hollowness, of yearning is still present in the back of the mind. So even if we get what we want, it's actually not going to be completely satisfying. It's almost never as good as we make it out to be in our mind, and it ultimately comes to an end sooner or later, leaving us right back where we started, or actually technically even worse, because then we've been feeding our addiction to sensuality, our addiction to sensory stimulation. So reflecting in this way on the drawbacks of the object itself, the object of desire, the drawbacks of actually getting the sensory experience that we're seeking for. This also can be a way of getting the mind to pull back. It's like, well, yeah, okay, so I really want XYZ, but even if I get XYZ, it's actually not going to be the answer to all my problems. It's not going to be really that amazing, and it's going to be temporary anyway. So it's not really a source of happiness. It's just a temporary distraction. And ultimately, in the end, I just wind up with even stronger sensual yearnings. So maybe not really worth it to pursue those kinds of experiences. So these are the two main recommendations then. So the first one is to, again, to recognize the inherent painfulness of that sensory yearning. And the second is to reflect upon the inherent unsatisfactoriness of whatever it is we're yearning for, whatever kind of sensory stimulation we're yearning for. Another approach, which is also a bit more direct, is to cultivate contentment with the present moment. So just being completely satisfied with things exactly as they are. So this also is a way of diminishing and overcoming that sensory yearning, that interest in some kind of imagined sensory experience. And another way of redirecting this is to actively enjoy one's meditation object. So for example, if you're doing mindfulness of the body, well, enjoy the sensation of your body. Enjoy the warmth of the body, the stability of the body. Enjoy the soothing sensation of the body. Enjoy the constant change in the body experience. So actually actively enjoying your meditation object is a way of taking that kamachanda and turning it towards the benefit of concentration, towards the benefit of one's meditation practice. The second of the five hindrances is vyapada, which has the meaning of aversion or negativity. And Here again, one of the more direct ways is to pay attention to the discomfort of the mind state itself, of the mental activity itself. So when the mind is caught up in aversion and negativity, that's an inherently painful experience. Again, we're usually fixated on why we're perfectly justified in hating whatever we're hating. But setting that aside for a moment, just focusing on the feeling of hating itself. So whether it's hating another person in the room, or whether it's hating some background noise, or whether it's hating the sensations of your body, or whether it's hating something that you remember happened, or hating something that you imagine will happen, or whatever it is, whatever kind of aversion is going on in the mind. Setting aside the object of our hatred and our, no doubt, perfectly reasonable justifications for our hatred, pay attention to the feeling of aversion itself. That like hostility, that negativity of mind, that how does that actually feel? And you'll realize it actually feels pretty gross. It feels pretty disgusting. It feels quite uncomfortable, unpleasant. Like needles jabbing your mind. It's not a pleasant experience. So when we set aside our justifications and we pay attention to the feeling itself, we realize that, once again, we're just torturing ourselves. We're not actually achieving anything useful. All we're doing is inflicting pain on ourselves through indulging in these mental patterns of aversion and negativity. Another approach, so similarly to kamachanda, another approach is to consider the object. So whatever it is that we're hating, is it actually something which is inherently completely loathsome? And of course the mind can very quickly start filling up with reasons. So for example, a sensation in the body, we can be like, yes, it's really painful, my shoulder hurts, my back hurts, my butt hurts, my knees hurt, my everything hurts, that this is just awful. But actually pay closer attention. What is it really? It's just sensation. It's just the body communicating information about the current state of the body. That's all. And we decide whether to like or dislike that information. But the information itself is neutral. The information itself is just information. And we make it one way or another. Or you hear the sound of the thunder in the distance, and you might be hating it like, oh, that noise is distracting me from my meditation. Well, actually, it's not the noise that's distracting you. It's your hatred of the noise. That's what's distracting you. The noise itself is just noise. It's just vibration. It's not actually inherently pleasant or unpleasant. It's just noise, just vibration in the air, vibration in your ears. That's all. But we make a story around it. And so what we're actually hating is not the sensation itself. We're hating the story that we're generating. So if we drop the story, then there's no target for our hatred anymore. The aversion has no object, and it starts to fade away on its own. It starts to die on its own. And also similarly to kamachanda, we can also address aversion through cultivating contentment with the present moment, contentment with the current experience, whatever it is. And similarly, we can cultivate enjoyment of our meditation object, because when the mind is thoroughly enjoying its meditation object, then it's not going to fall into cycles of negativity, of hostility. The third of the five hindrances, so tina midda, this has the meaning of dullness or haziness, fogginess of mind. So when the mind feels blurry and hazy and unclear. And here it's good to have some awareness of the current state of the body. So sometimes there's actually a good reason for this. So for example, if you're sick, when you're sick, then the mind tends to be blurry and hazy. So that's actually completely understandable. That's not a hindrance. That's just a product of sickness. Or if you haven't been sleeping enough lately, maybe you've been having some insomnia problems. Well, once again, it's perfectly normal. If you don't sleep enough for a couple days, then your mind is going to be blurry and hazy. That's to be expected. Or maybe you've been doing a lot of hard physical activity, doing a lot of exercise or doing a lot of physical work. And similarly, that can make you quite tired, which then can lead to the mind being blurry. So checking to see, is there actually just a physical basis for this feeling of blurriness or haziness or tiredness? And if so, then the physical solution might actually be the most straightforward. So take a nap, drink some tea. If you're not on the 8 precepts, then you might have a light snack. If you are in the 8 precepts, then you could drink some fruit juice or something of that sort, something to help perk you up a little bit. So if it's a physical reason for your sense of drowsiness and dullness, then address it physically. Also, it can sometimes be related to our posture, so another physical thing. So if our posture is slumped, so if our back is slumped forward and our chest is collapsed and head is tucked down, then those are all things that tend to contribute to a dullness and haziness of mind. So then sitting up straight, shoulders back, chest lifted, these are all things which then can contribute to a bit more brightness and alertness of mind. Similarly, if we're meditating with our eyes closed and we're noticing dullness and haziness of mind, then opening the eyes a little bit, meditating with eyes half open. That also tends to sharpen the mind, make the mind a little bit more alert and attentive and clear. So these are things on the physical side of dealing with dullness and drowsiness, and these are really not to be underestimated. Like if you're trying to get by with only sleeping 4 hours a night, odds are you're going to have some dullness and drowsiness during your meditation. Only under specific conditions can people get away with sleeping very little and still be alert during their meditation. Most of the time, that's not really going to work. So just being realistic with the physical aspect of how the body affects the energy level of the mind, and take care of your body appropriately to support the alertness of the mind. So that might mean sleeping a bit more, or it might mean resting a bit when you need to, or it might mean drinking some tea before the meditation, or whatever you need to do in order to regulate the energy level of your body. So if it's not a physical problem, then we need to investigate more closely what's going on with this dullness of mind. So if this mental dullness, it doesn't seem to be physically produced, then mental dullness is usually related to a lack of interest in our meditation practice. So whatever meditation technique we're using, if we're not interested in that meditation technique, but we keep trying to force the mind to keep doing it, eventually the mind will start trying to escape. And one of the ways it escapes is through blanking out, drifting off. So in that case, often the best solution is just to switch meditation technique. Switch to a meditation technique that you find more interesting, something that you find more engaging, something that sparks your enthusiasm or your curiosity or your interest. Or if you're using a very passive meditation object, then you might switch to a more active meditation technique, something which involves deliberately moving the mind in specified or controlled ways. These are also ways that can help to reinvigorate the mind when we're doing meditation practice. Or choosing a meditation object that's more either inherently pleasant, such as metta meditation, or, as mentioned with the previous hindrances, actively enjoying our meditation object. So if we're doing mindfulness of the body, actively enjoying the body makes it more interesting. Because generally speaking, we tend to be interested in pleasant experiences. So making our meditation pleasant then will naturally tend to make the mind more alert and more engaged, and therefore tends to oppose the hindrance of dullness, of haziness of mind. And the fourth hindrance, so in Pali this is uddhacca kukucca. So the word uddhacca quite clearly means agitation or restlessness. The word kukucca is a bit more nuanced. So in some contexts, the word kukucca has the meaning of remorse or regret. In other meanings, it has a meaning more similar to uddhacca. So in some contexts, it has a meaning, again, more similar to restlessness or agitation. And so the main point of uddhacca kukucca is, again, restlessness, agitation. And we can talk about physical agitation, which is an urge to move the body, and mental agitation, so an urge to move the mind. So when dealing with physical agitation, again, it's good to consider the causes. If you just drank 3 cups of coffee before sitting down to meditate, that might be why you have this overpowering urge to twitch through the meditation. Maybe there's a reason there. So you might consider, well, maybe next time I won't drink 3 cups of coffee before the meditation. Maybe I'll just have 1 cup or half a cup. Or maybe I'll just have a little bit of tea. Or maybe nothing at all. See how that goes. Or if you just ate a bunch of sugar, again, that's something which can produce physical twitchiness and agitation. So considering the physical things which might be contributing. Also with posture, if you're noticing a lot of physical agitation, then sometimes deliberately relaxing your posture can be very helpful. So just as with dullness, it can help to make the posture very rigid and upright. If you're dealing with agitation, it can be useful to let the body slump and relax a little bit. Not too much, but just a little bit of kind of like melting into your seat can help to encourage a bit more serenity when you're experiencing physical agitation. And if you're finding it really, really difficult, then of course it can be good to get up and do walking meditation. So if you have this really strong urge to move the body, well then move the body in a specific, controlled, meditative way, which is exactly what walking meditation is for. Setting aside the physical things, again, we look at the mind. So what are the possible reasons for mental agitation? So when the mind is constantly moving around or running around. Well, one thing, again, to consider is what we've been doing throughout the day that might be contributing to that. So if you just spent 3 hours listening to heavy metal music and binge watching a TV show and then having a vicious political argument with one of your relatives and then you sit down to meditate, odds are pretty good you're going to have some mental agitation. Because that's what you've been doing to your mind for the past several hours. So you sit down to meditate, and what's going to happen? All that noisiness and busyness you've been cramming your mind full of is just going to keep reverberating around in your mind. So maybe stop listening to music, stop watching shows, stop having political arguments, and see if maybe that makes your meditation a lot more serene and peaceful. You might notice it has a really, really strong effect. Because in fact it does have a really, really strong effect. So we cannot divide our meditation practice from the rest of our life. We're actually training our mind every single moment. We're not just training our mind when we meditate. We're training our mind 24/7. It's just that most of the time, we're training our mind in unwholesome states. So you spend 23 and a half hours training your mind in unwholesome states, and then half an hour training your mind in wholesome states. What do you think wins out? Which one do you think is going to be stronger? This is not a trick question. I'll let you figure out the answer for yourself. So ideally, we spend all of our time cultivating the mind in wholesome states, training the mind in wholesome states. So really consider, what am I doing throughout the day that's contributing to mental agitation and restlessness? And how can I minimize or reduce or eliminate those activities? Or change the way I'm approaching those activities in a way that will make them less disturbing to the mind, less agitating to the mind. So again, considering the external factors that we're introducing into our mind that contribute to agitation and restlessness. Another thing which can actually contribute quite a bit is arrogance. So if we have a lot of arrogance, a lot of conceit, a lot of sense of self-importance, well, then that actually makes for a very fragile state of mind. Because if people aren't sufficiently inflating our ego, then we'll tend to be rolling around in a lot of agitation and discomfort related to that. Reflecting on like, oh, I can't believe those people said that, and those people don't respect me enough, and those people don't appreciate me enough. And so the mind just starts rolling around in all these stories about one's deflated ego, or the fact that one isn't getting treated the way one thinks one should. So noticing then the storytelling of the mind, noticing also how the mind tends to generate stories about our experience, and recognizing that stories are not reality. Stories are just stories. So when the mind starts to tell a story like, oh, well, he said and she said and they said and this and that, it's just like, oh, it's just a story. I don't need to get involved in this story. I don't need to take this story seriously. I can let the story end. And I can let it be forgotten. It can disappear. It can fade away forever. There's nothing of interest or value in the story. It can come to an end. So letting the story fade. So we don't need to tell any new stories. There are no new stories. This is actually something which is very important to keep in mind for anyone who's engaged in any kind of creative activity or artistic pursuit. Whatever you think you're creating, it's already been done. You are not adding anything to the universe. All you're doing is repeating something that's already been done 100 million times, which means you don't need to do it. You still can if you want to, but you don't need to. So those brilliant, amazing ideas that appear in your mind during meditation, forget them. Nothing will be lost, because whatever that amazing idea is, 100 million other people have already had that idea. Nothing is lost. Get on with your meditation. Let it disappear. So another very important skill in meditation is the willingness to forget things. Being perfectly willing to forget whatever that amazing idea that just popped into your mind, that stunning inspiration that will change the world, forget it. Let it go. Right now, that is not the most important thing. The most important thing is sticking with your meditation. Your solutions to climate change, forget it. Greta Thunberg's working on that. Let her take care of it. You don't need to take care of it. Realistically, we're all going to hell in a handbasket anyway. It's all a catastrophe. So you're not fixing the catastrophe. Forget it. Forget your amazing solutions to world hunger. It's not happening. Forget it. So whatever amazing ideas appear in your mind, forget it. Nothing is lost by you forgetting these ideas. Let them go. So again, looking at what the mind is doing. And again, no matter what justifications we have for our mental activities, we can just recognize by engaging in these activities, I'm ruining my meditation. It can seem like such a wonderful thing, like, okay, I'm going to sit here and plan out this and think about that and analyze this. And yeah, of course, that might all be perfectly justifiable, but let's be realistic. You're just destroying your meditation. That's all you're doing. So when it's time to sit down and plan things, then you sit down and plan things. When it's time to sit down and meditate, then you sit down and meditate. So drawing clear lines about what you're doing with your time. And when it's time to meditate, then it's not time to plan things. It's not time to analyze things. It's not time to do anything other than meditate. And as long as you're doing anything else with your mind, then you're just wasting your time. You're wasting your meditation time. So I've been practicing meditation now for most of my life. And every now and then when I want to get depressed, I think about how much of that meditation time I've wasted by thinking about silly things. It's a disturbingly high number. So when we're realistic with ourselves and we reflect, we realize how much of our meditation time we've wasted by thinking about silly things. Or even worse, thinking about important things. Because silly things, we at least know they're silly. Like when you spend a whole meditation period thinking about the Kardashians, then you actually know that was a silly waste of time. But when you spend a whole meditation period planning your solutions to climate change and world hunger and world peace and whatever else, you might actually fool yourself into thinking you weren't wasting time. But nonetheless, you were wasting time because you weren't meditating. So just being clear, being realistic. When it's time to meditate, that's all it's time for. It's just time to do meditation practice, and that's it. Anything else is a waste of time. And so then we come to the fifth hindrance. So the hindrance of skepticism, vicikiccha in Pali. So this is the mind which is constantly rolling around in doubt about, fundamentally, doubt about the Buddhist teachings, doubt about the value of the Dhamma, doubt about the effectiveness of the path, doubt about the value of meditating even. How many times have you been sitting there meditating and the thought pops up of like, I wonder if I'm just wasting my time. Must be something better I can do with my time. I know better things I can do with my time. Or you think like, I wonder if actually the Buddha really knew what he was talking about. I wonder if this really is the path to true happiness. So these skeptical thoughts appear in the mind, these doubts about Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, these doubts about the value of Dhamma practice, or whether we're doing Dhamma practice correctly, or whether we are even personally capable of making progress. Sometimes it's doubt about our own personal capabilities. And recognizing that skeptical thinking, whatever else it might achieve, it's achieving one thing for sure, which is preventing us from making progress in our meditation. So actually, if you want to guarantee for sure that the Dhamma doesn't work, then don't practice the Dhamma. That's the surest way to not get any results. So recognizing that these skeptical thoughts are actually preventing us from finding out the accuracy of the Dhamma. They're actually preventing us from getting the benefits of the path. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. As long as we sit there doubting the effectiveness of the Dhamma, then we will actually fulfill that prophecy of getting no benefit from Dhamma. Because benefit only comes when we actually commit ourselves to doing the practices and seeing the results for ourselves. So then when this skeptical thinking arises, then one thing we can do is reflect similarly in this way, that if we want to know for ourselves whether or not the Buddha is right, then we have to actually sincerely try out his instructions and see what happens. That's one way of addressing the skepticism. Another thing that we can do, and this works especially well if you've been practicing for a while, is you can reflect on the improvements and benefits that you've noticed through your own Dhamma practice. So reflecting on the benefits that you've gained through practicing Sila, Samadhi, and Panya to whatever extent that you have been practicing it. Reflecting upon whatever degree of happiness or serenity or character development that you've had through developing the Noble Eightfold Path, through practicing morality, through practicing meditation, through contemplating the Dhamma. And you recognize, again, usually as long as you've been practicing for some length of time, a few weeks, a few months, a few years, then you'll realize, yeah, actually there has been improvement, there has been progress. I am a happier person, a calmer person, a nicer person, a wiser person. I still have quite a ways to go, but I've definitely made progress by doing these practices. So that helps to build up our faith, our confidence that the Dhamma is actually valid and it's worth pursuing, and it's worth pursuing further and deeper, so that we can get deeper results, more profound results. So reflecting on the benefits that we received from our practice can be a potent way of countering this skeptical or doubtful thinking. So this is a brief overview of the five hindrances. So again, one of these centrally important topics to come back to time and again during the course of our meditation practice as a way of again, preparing the ground of the mind. Once the mind is clear of the five hindrances, then you put your mind on your meditation technique and you keep it there, and your meditation practice will naturally grow with leaps and bounds. So I'll go ahead and conclude at this time.
Handamayam dhammakathaya sadhukaram dadamase.
Sadhu, sadhu.